I kept sending my reports after the orders stopped coming. The system still expected my signal, even as it gave me nothing back. Each transmission went out into silence, logged and signed like the rest. When the power failed, the routine ended, but the responsibility did not. In the summer of 1941, as German forces advanced rapidly across the western territories of the Soviet Union, the Red Army's communications network came under immediate strain. Entire field headquarters were displaced within days. Telephone lines were severed by artillery fire or simply abandoned during retreats. Radio sets, portable and fixed, became the primary means by which higher command attempted to maintain awareness of units that were increasingly dispersed and isolated. One such radio position was established near the outskirts of a small administrative town east of Minsk. Before the invasion, the site had functioned as a routine relay station for military traffic moving between army-level headquarters and subordinate divisions. Its responsibilities were not glamorous. Operators received encoded situation reports, retransmitted orders, and maintained hourly signal checks to confirm the integrity of the network. The work followed a strict schedule. Logs were kept in standardized notebooks, each entry signed and timed. By late June, the operational situation in the region had deteriorated. German armoured units had broken through multiple defensive lines, and Soviet formations were retreating eastward under pressure. The relay station, originally positioned well behind the front, found itself closer to active combat than planned. Still, no formal evacuation order had yet been issued. Communications doctrine emphasized continuity above all else. Stations were expected to remain operational until explicit instructions were received. The radio operator assigned to the night shift at the station was a junior non-commissioned officer trained in signals work during peacetime exercises. His background was typical of many technical specialists of the period. He had completed basic training, followed by several months of instruction on shortwave transmitters, cipher procedures, and maintenance. He was not a commissioned officer, nor did he hold any command authority. His role was defined by the equipment in front of him and the schedule pinned to the wall. During the first days of the invasion, the volume of traffic increased sharply. Messages arrived out of sequence. Call signs changed without notice. Units reported positions that no longer matched the maps on file. The operator recorded each transmission as instructed, noting signals to strength, frequency drift, and any irregularities. When a scheduled check-in failed, he logged the absence and attempted retransmission at the prescribed intervals. By the end of the first week, several stations to the west had gone silent. The operator noted this in the margins of his logbook, marking call signs with a small pencil dash. This was standard practice, indicating a missed transmission rather than a confirmed loss. No explanation accompanied these absences. Higher command had not yet updated the network status. Supply conditions at the relay station began to worsen. Replacement vacuum tubes and spare parts were limited. Power was drawn from a generator that required fuel deliveries, which became irregular as transport routes were disrupted. The operator and his small support team improvised, running the generator only during scheduled transmission windows to conserve fuel. Between shifts, they slept in the same building as the equipment, using rolled coats for bedding. On July 3rd, a general order was transmitted, instructing certain rear area units to prepare for relocation further east. The message did not specifically mention the relay station by call sign. According to protocol, relocation orders required confirmation and a follow-up specifying timing and destination. Neither arrived. The operator logged the general order, acknowledged receipt, and continued with routine transmissions. Over the next several days, incoming traffic diminished. Messages from higher headquarters became shorter and less frequent. Some were partially garbled, suggesting transmission from mobile sets under poor conditions. The operator noted increased interference on the assigned frequencies, possibly from enemy jamming, or from the sheer congestion of the spectrum as multiple units attempted to transmit simultaneously. Despite the uncertainty, the daily schedule remained unchanged. At set hours, the operator transmitted status reports, station operational, power limited, awaiting instructions. Each report followed the same format, encoded according to the cipher table in use that week. The operator copied the encoded groups carefully, checking for errors before keying the transmitter. Outside the building, the situation was visibly changing. Military traffic on nearby roads moved steadily eastward. Columns of infantry passed without stopping. Occasionally, small groups of stragglers appeared asking for directions or water. The relay station was not authorized to provide tactical guidance, and the operator referred such inquiries to the nearest field headquarters, though he was no longer certain where that headquarters was located. On July 8th, artillery fire was heard at a distance for the first time. The sound was irregular, suggesting engagements rather than sustained bombardment. The operator recorded the time and direction in his log, habit developed during training though not formally required. He continued transmitting at scheduled intervals, receiving no acknowledgements to several outgoing messages. That evening, a brief transmission arrived from an Army-level signal center. It acknowledged receipt of earlier reports but provided no new instructions. The message ended with a standard directive to maintain communications discipline and await further orders. The operator logged the message, signed his name, and prepared the next scheduled transmission. By mid-July, the relay station was effectively isolated. The telephone lines connected to local command posts were dead. The generator fuel was nearly exhausted. The operator and his team discussed the possibility of withdrawal, but without written orders, no one was prepared to abandon the equipment. Regulations emphasized that unauthorized destruction or abandonment of signal equipment was punishable. The operator was aware of this, as were his colleagues. On July 14th, the last confirmed transmission from higher headquarters was received. It was brief and partially obscured by interference. It instructed all stations still in operation to report their status. The operator responded immediately, confirming that the relay station remained functional, though with limited power and no local command presence. No acknowledgement followed. In the days that followed, the operator continued to transmit. Each entry in the logbook reflected the same routine: date, time, frequency, call sign, content. He noted the absence of replies, marking them with the same pencil dash used earlier. The generator was run for shorter periods. When fuel finally ran out, he switched to a battery backup system intended for emergency use. The signal strength dropped accordingly, a fact he recorded without comment. By July 18th, the operational situation beyond the walls of the station was unclear. No friendly units were observed nearby. The radio set still functioned, though barely. The operator prepared the next scheduled transmission, consulting the cipher table one more time. He logged the time, adjusted the frequency, and keyed the transmitter. The logbook entry ended with the same formal notation as before. There was no indication in the handwriting that the situation was unusual. The routine was maintained to the extent possible. At the bottom of the page, the operator signed his name and closed the notebook. By the third week of July, the relay station's continued operation no longer aligned with the assumptions under which it had been established. According to communications doctrine, a station without confirmed links to higher headquarters was expected to attempt re-establishment through alternate frequencies and relay chains. The operator followed these procedures precisely. Each day he cycled through secondary and tertiary frequencies listed in the signal plan, transmitting brief status messages at reduced power in an effort to conserve the remaining battery capacity. None were answered. The absence of replies did not, in itself, constitute permission to cease operations. The regulations governing signaled troops were explicit. Silence from command did not relieve a station of its obligation to transmit. Only a clear order, properly authenticated, authorized shutdown or relocation. The operator was trained to treat ambiguity as a condition to be endured, not resolved independently. As the days passed, physical signs of the broader collapse became more evident. Smoke columns appeared intermittently on the western horizon. At night, distant flashes were visible, though their source could not be determined. Small arms fire was occasionally heard closer than before, though still sporadic. The operator noted these observations in the margins of his logbook, not as intelligence reports, but as contextual details that might later explain signal interruptions. On July 20th, a new complication emerged. A short, weak transmission broke through the background noise on one of the auxiliary frequencies. It carried a call sign unfamiliar to the operator, using an outdated authentication format. The message itself was fragmentary, reporting movement eastward and requesting confirmation of friendly positions. The operator did not reply immediately. Protocol required verification of the call sign and authentication code before any exchange. He checked the current cipher tables. The format used by the transmitting station corresponded to an earlier issue, no longer valid. This could indicate a unit cut off from updated orders, or it could indicate enemy deception. Without confirmation, the operator logged the transmission as unverified and did not respond. The decision was procedural rather than personal. Later that day, another transmission arrived, similar in content and equally weak. Again, the operator logged it and withheld a response. The rules governing radio discipline were strict, particularly under conditions where enemy interception was assumed. Unauthorized replies risked compromising network security. Fuel and power constraints further narrowed the operator's options. The battery backup system was not designed for prolonged use. Voltage dropped steadily, affecting transmission clarity. The operator adjusted output settings and reduced transmission length, prioritizing scheduled status reports over unscheduled traffic. Each adjustment was recorded in the log along with the estimated remaining power. By July 22nd, the scheduled reports themselves began to change in tone, though not in format. Where earlier entries had noted operational without incident, the operator now recorded operational with limitations. He specified power constraints, lack of acknowledgement, and absence of contact with local command. These were factual statements, not requests. The reports did not ask for instructions, they documented conditions. The lack of response from higher headquarters created a growing divergence between official doctrine and practical reality. Doctrine assumed a functioning hierarchy even if disrupted. In reality, the hierarchy in this sector appeared to have dissolved. Units moved without coordination. Command posts relocated or ceased to exist. Yet the written regulations governing the operator's duties remained unchanged. On July 24th, the relay station received fire for the first time. A burst of machine gun fire struck the outer wall of the building, shattering a window and damaging a wooden support beam. No one was injured. The operator and his team took cover briefly, then assessed the damage. The radio equipment was intact. After a short interruption, the operator resumed transmission at the next scheduled interval. He recorded the incident in the logbook with the same neutral phrasing used for technical faults. Exterior damage observed, equipment unaffected. There was no indication of the source of the fire, no follow-up engagement occurred. The station's position remained unchanged. That night, the operator attempted once more to establish contact using emergency frequencies reserved for situations of network collapse. These frequencies were rarely used and carried a higher risk of interception, but doctrine permitted their use when standard channels failed. The operator transmitted a concise message identifying the station, reporting continued operation, and requesting confirmation of command authority. Again, there was no reply. By this stage, the tension between regulation and circumstance was no longer abstract. The operator understood that remaining at the station indefinitely was unsustainable. Power would fail completely. Ammunition for personal weapons was limited. Food supplies were nearly exhausted. Yet the absence of explicit orders placed him in a procedural void. To abandon the station without authorization risked severe consequences if later judged premature or unjustified. Other members of the support team raised the issue openly. They asked whether continued transmission served any purpose if no one was listening. The operator did not dismiss the question, but he did not alter the routine. His responsibility, as defined by his training, was not to assess strategic value, but to execute assigned functions until formally relieved. On July 26th, another unverified transmission was intercepted. Stronger than previous ones and closer in proximity, it reported German units advancing along a nearby road and warned of encirclement. The call sign again did not match current listings. The operator faced the same procedural barrier as before. Without authentication, he could not respond. He logged the message, noting increased signal strength and proximity. That afternoon, the sound of vehicles approached from the west. Through a shattered window, the operator observed a small column of armoured vehicles moving cautiously along the road. Their markings were not immediately visible. The station's location, once considered deep in the rear, was now clearly within a contested zone. Despite this, the scheduled transmission at 1800 hours went out as planned. The operator reduced power to the minimum necessary to conserve the battery, carefully keying the encoded groups. He listened for a response until the battery voltage dropped below operational threshold. None came. As night fell, the operator made a decision within the narrow confines of regulation. He prepared one final comprehensive status report, longer than previous ones but still within doctrinal limits. It detailed the station's condition, lack of command contact, power status, and observed enemy movement. He transmitted it using the emergency frequency, accepting the increased risk of interception as justified by the circumstances. The battery failed midway through the transmission. The carrier signal faded abruptly. The operator logged the failure, noting the exact time and estimated remaining charge. He did not attempt further transmission that night. The following morning, with daylight revealing the extent of nearby movement, the operator reopened the logbook. He recorded that no further transmissions were possible without power. He noted the absence of any received orders or acknowledgements since July 14th. The entries were factual, unemotional, and precise. The station, once a node in a functioning network, now existed outside the assumptions of that network. The regulations under which it operated offered no clear guidance for this condition. The operator remained at his post, the equipment silent, the logbook open. By late July and 41, the relay station's status no longer fit any category anticipated by the Red Army's communications manuals. It was neither operational in the full sense nor formally decommissioned. The equipment remained intact but inert. The operator and the remaining members of the support team were present, armed and provisioned only minimally. No chain of command had made contact. No orders had been received to clarify their situation. Under standard regulations, a signal station that lost power was expected to restore it or relocate under orders. The manuals assumed that fuel, batteries, or replacement equipment could eventually be obtained through the logistics system. In this case, that system no longer reached the station. Roads were contested. Units passing nearby did not stop. There was no mechanism for requesting resupply without a functioning transmitter. The operator reviewed the signal regulations again, page by page, by the light of a shaded lantern. He was not searching for permission to abandon the post, but for instruction on how to act when the post itself could no longer perform its function. The text offered none. The closest provision concerned the destruction of equipment to prevent capture, but even that required authorization except in cases of immediate enemy seizure. That condition had not yet been met. On July 28th, a patrol approached the building in daylight. The operator observed them from cover. Their uniforms were German. The patrol did not immediately enter the station. They moved past it, continuing eastward, apparently unaware of its purpose or choosing not to investigate. The operator logged the sighting with time and direction and estimated strength. The logbook had become the sole remaining output of the station. The presence of enemy forces in the immediate vicinity altered the risk calculation, though not the regulations themselves. The operator understood that capture would likely result in interrogation and confiscation of the equipment. Signal logs, cipher tables, and frequency lists were considered sensitive material. Their loss could compromise other units, even if those units were no longer active. That afternoon, the operator gathered the remaining materials: cipher sheets, frequency plans, and authentication tables. According to procedure, these were to be destroyed if capture was imminent. The definition of imminent was not precise, but enemy patrols within sight of the station qualified under common interpretation. The operator burned the documents in a metal container, ensuring complete destruction. He recorded the action in the logbook, citing the relevant regulation by number. The radio equipment itself presented a more difficult problem. Destruction required tools and time. Some components could be removed or damaged, but a thorough demolition was beyond the means available. The operator disabled what he could, removing key parts and damaging others to prevent immediate use. Again, he documented the actions taken and the limitations encountered. With the transmitter no longer operable and sensitive materials destroyed, the station's original mission had effectively ended. Yet the operator did not leave immediately. He remained overnight, maintaining watch and recording any observations. The logbook entries from this period are sparse but consistent. Times are noted. Movements are described briefly, there is no commentary. On July 30th, a small group of Soviet soldiers arrived from the east. They were disorganized, lacking a clear unit designation. They reported that their formation had been encircled and broken up days earlier. They asked whether the station was still transmitting. The operator informed them that it was not. He did not provide details beyond that fact. One of the soldiers suggested leaving the area before German forces returned. The operator acknowledged the suggestion but did not act on it immediately. He consulted the regulations one final time. With the station disabled, the equipment rendered unusable, and no possibility of resuming communications, the conditions for withdrawal without orders were arguably met. The manuals did not state this explicitly, but they did not forbid it either. The decision that followed was not dramatic, it was administrative. The operator closed the logbook, added a final dated entry stating that the station was non-operational, materials destroyed, and personnel departing due to loss of mission capability. He signed the entry in the same manner as all previous ones. The group left the building on foot, moving eastward along secondary roads. The operator carried the logbook with him, wrapped in oilcloth. It was no longer an active record, but a completed one. He did not know whether it would ever be reviewed, or by whom. In the days that followed, the operator remained with other retreating personnel, avoiding main routes and large formations. There was no opportunity to report informally. Command structures were fragmented. Units merged or dissolved. Survival took precedence over procedure, though the operator continued to note dates and locations in the margins of the logbook when circumstances allowed. At some point in early August, the operator reached an area under firmer Soviet control. He was processed, reassigned, and eventually returned to signal duties elsewhere. The logbook was submitted along with other documents, placed in storage without immediate review. There was no debrief focused specifically on the relay station. The war had moved on. The operator resumed routine work, following schedules, maintaining equipment, and recording transmissions. The episode of the isolated station was not mentioned in orders or reports. It existed only in the pages of the logbook filed among thousands of similar records generated during the chaotic months of 1941. In the months that followed the events at the relay station, the operator's wartime service continued without distinction. Like many technical specialists reassigned after the summer of 1941, he was absorbed into a system struggling to reconstitute itself under extreme pressure. New units formed rapidly. Signal companies were reorganized, often with incomplete personnel and equipment. Training was abbreviated. Experience, even fragmentary, was valued more than formal preparation. The operator's reassignment placed him at a divisional signal unit operating further east. The work there differed little in structure from his previous duties. Radios were installed, frequencies assigned, schedules posted. The same procedural language governed transmissions, the same logbooks were issued. Each shift began with equipment checks and ended with signed entries. There was no reference to the earlier relay station, and no inquiry into the circumstances under which it had ceased operation. This absence of follow-up was not unusual. During the latter half of 1941, the Soviet command system was overwhelmed by the losses, rapid movements, and incomplete reporting. Entire formations disappeared without formal documentation. Communications records accumulated faster than they could be reviewed. Logbooks were collected, boxed, and sent to archives or storage depots, where they awaited classification or destruction depending on their perceived value. The operator's logbook from the isolated station was one among many. It contained no dramatic appeals, no deviations from format, no overt expressions of distress. To an administrator reviewing documents months or years later, it would have appeared routine, even dull. Dates, times, frequencies, signal strengths, the absence of responses was noted but not emphasized. There was no summary page drawing attention to the anomaly of continued transmissions without command acknowledgement. Within the operator's new unit, authority was exercised rigidly. The experience of collapse had reinforced an emphasis on discipline and adherence to orders. Unauthorized initiative, even when previously unavoidable, was viewed with suspicion. The operator did not volunteer details of his earlier isolation. There was no incentive to do so. His conduct had not been questioned, but neither had it been examined. As the war progressed, the Red Army's communications doctrine evolved. Redundancy was increased. Mobile radio units were expanded. Greater emphasis was placed on rapid relocation and destruction protocols. These changes were codified in revised manuals issued in later years. The conditions faced by the relay station in July 1941 were implicitly acknowledged, but not cited as specific case studies. After the war, the operator was demobilized along with millions of others. His service record listed his assignments and decorations, if any in summary form. The relay station did not appear as a separate entry. It was subsumed under broader unit designations that no longer existed in their original form. The logbook, meanwhile, remained in archival storage, its pages intact. It was not until decades later that the document resurfaced. During a post-war effort to Zheng Li and catalogue wartime records, archivists encountered the logbook while reviewing signal unit materials from the early months of the invasion. At first glance, it appeared unremarkable, but closer inspection revealed a pattern that stood out against the background of other records. The entries continued well beyond the last confirmed communications from higher headquarters in that sector. Scheduled transmissions were recorded methodically, even as acknowledgements ceased entirely. The archivists compared the dates and call signs against known operational timelines. According to official histories, the area in which the relay station was located had fallen under German control by mid-July. Yet the logbook recorded transmissions and observations several days beyond that point. There was no indication that the operator was aware of the broader situation. He continued to act as though the network still existed. Further analysis showed that the operator had not altered transmission formats, frequencies, or schedules beyond what regulations allowed. There were no improvised messages, no attempts to contact unauthorized recipients. Even the final comprehensive status report, cut short by power failure, adhered to doctrinal structure. The destruction of sensitive materials was recorded with regulatory citations, suggesting deliberate compliance rather than panic. From an institutional perspective, the logbook presented an uncomfortable example. It demonstrated both the strengths and limitations of rigid doctrine. On one hand, the operator's discipline ensured that communications were maintained as long as physically possible, preserving any chance of contact. On the other hand, the absence of adaptive guidance left him isolated, transmitting into silence bound by rules that no longer matched reality. The response from authorities was muted. The document was classified as an illustrative case rather than a subject of formal commendation or criticism. There was no retroactive award nor any censure. The operator himself was not contacted. He may not have known that his actions were later examined at all. Within military academic circles, the logbook was occasionally cited in discussions of early war command and control failures. It served as a primary source example of how lower-level personnel experienced systemic collapse. The focus, however, remained institutional rather than personal. The operator was referenced by rank and role, not by name. In this context, the significance of the continued transmissions lay not in their tactical impact, but in what they revealed about the structure of wartime communication. The operator had not kept transmitting out of defiance or heroism. He had done so because the system he served provided no alternative instruction. His actions were the logical outcome of his training. The tension between obedience and judgment, between procedure and circumstance, was not resolved at the relay station. It was deferred, absorbed into the broader narrative of adaptation that unfolded over the course of the war. By the time doctrine caught up with experience, the specific conditions faced in July 1941 were already part of history. The logbook remained as evidence of that gap. The rediscovery of the logbook did not lead to public recognition or formal reassessment of the operator's service. In the post-war Soviet system, individual actions that did not clearly align with heroism, sacrifice, or measurable success were rarely elevated. The document was preserved, catalogued, and cited sparingly, its value lying in what it illustrated rather than whom it represented. From an institutional standpoint, the logbook became one of many artifacts used to understand the failures of command and control during the opening phase of the war. It joined after-action reports, intercepted messages, and fragmented unit diaries in reconstructing how rapidly the pre-war assumptions collapsed. The emphasis of this work was corrective. It sought to identify weaknesses so that they would not be repeated, rather than to assign praise or blame. In revised post-war signal manuals, certain provisions appeared that had not existed in 1941. Greater discretion was granted to station commanders when contact with higher headquarters was lost for extended periods. Clearer thresholds were defined for withdrawal and equipment destruction. These changes were not explicitly linked to the relay station logbook, but they addressed precisely the procedural void it revealed. The operator himself faded into anonymity. His name appeared only in personnel rosters and routine service records. Like many veterans, he returned to civilian life carrying experiences that were never fully articulated or examined. There is no evidence that he spoke publicly about the relay station or his continued transmissions. If he reflected on them, those reflections were private. What remains is the document. Page after page, the entries follow the same structure even as the surrounding conditions deteriorate. Timestamps remain precise. Signal strengths are noted carefully. The absence of replies is recorded without speculation. There is no language indicating fear, frustration, or doubt. The record ends not with a dramatic declaration, but with a formal statement that the station was no longer operational and that personnel were departing due to loss of mission capability. In this sense, the logbook does not tell a story of resistance or defiance. It tells a story of compliance carried to its limit. The operator did not decide to keep transmitting because he believed it would change the situation. He did so because the framework governing his actions had not yet acknowledged that the situation had changed. For historians, this distinction matters. It complicates simplified narratives of wartime behaviour that divide actions into categories of courage or failure. The continued transmissions were neither futile gestures nor acts of quiet heroism. They were the predictable outcome of a system that prized continuity and obedience in circumstances where adaptability had not yet been codified. The relay station itself no longer exists. Its location, once marked on operational maps, was overtaken by subsequent movements, rebuilt or erased entirely. The equipment was lost or scrapped. The people who passed by it in the summer of 1941, retreating soldiers, advancing patrols, left no record of their impressions. Only the logbook endured. In the end, its significance lies not in what the transmissions accomplished, but in what they reveal. They show how war is experienced at the lowest functional level, where individuals operate within narrow roles defined by regulation, often without awareness of the broader picture. They show how systems fail gradually, not all at once, and how people continue to perform assigned tasks even as the assumptions behind those tasks dissolve. The radio operator kept transmitting after orders stopped because, from his position, orders had not stopped. They had simply ceased to arrive. That distinction, preserved in ink and timestamps, is the quiet legacy of his service.